Do networking events trip you up? Are you not sure how to ask for that promotion? When you're nervous going into a conversation, do you find yourself waffling around the edges and not really saying anything at all? I know I have. I know I've sat through enough events and seminars where someone who gets 60 seconds takes 3 minutes and you still don't know what it is that they do or, or how they can help you. Um, I find that in a more digital first world, the art of good conversation seems to have been eroded. The risk is that we're going to leave a terrible first impression, and first impressions are key, as we'll explore today. The art of conversation is lost on some, especially the first minute of that conversation, and that's why I've trawled my network and I found communications expert Chris Fenning, who hopefully through the next period of time, we're going to have a brilliant conversation about how we can start conversations, have better communication, and we're going to leave you with some tips, tricks, and ideas about how you can start to manage your own communications moving forwards. Chris, good morning to you. Take some time to introduce yourself, the work you do. How did you get here, and who do you help?
Well, first of all, Rob, thank you very much for inviting me on the show. I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have. As an intro, you've asked me a really broad topic. Can I get it all into 1 minute? I suppose that is a challenge. So, hi, I'm Chris Fenning. I write about and teach communication skills. I wasn't always in communication. I started out as a satellite design engineer, as a techie in aerospace. And over the course of about 20 years, I moved through 6 different industries, tech, defense, healthcare, travel industry, and others. And through that time, I've found a lot of holes in communication training. And those holes were frustrating because often people would say things like, to be a good communicator, you should be clear and concise. Like, great, that's what I should do, but how? And that's what I spend my time doing now, finding and answering the how and helping other people learn how to be clear and concise, how to bridge that technical to business divide, how to give a great status update, how to do lots of things that are important in everyday communication situations.
Brilliant. And have you always been interested in communication? Have you always had a knack for communication? Because I find a lot of people struggle with it. Is it something that you've had to teach yourself, or are you a natural?
Well, in the beginning, I thought I was a natural, and over a period of time, many people told me I was not. I made the mistake. I was a talker, and I
Mm.
thought that talking a lot and loudly and confidently meant I was a good communicator. Actually, all it did was annoy the people around me. And I was very, very fortunate that when I started work, I had some wonderful managers who, in a kind and helpful way, pointed that out to me. They had to point it out a lot, but it was pointed out to me that my approach to communication was not good communication. And that started me on the path of sort of that intrigue of, well, what is good communication? And it took me down lots of communication training programs, which led to the frustration of these programs are a little bit vague. Not all of them. There's some really good stuff out there, particularly around public speaking and things like that. But for everyday work communication, how to stand out in your job, there just wasn't anything that had real substance. And so that journey took me to learning, developing my own, having lots of opportunities to practice in very high profile positions in around the world in multiple companies. And all of that culminated in me teaching my teams. As I rose up through manager and director positions, I taught my teams, I taught my departments, and then I was started to be invited to teach other departments in the companies. And that was the point that I didn't realize I should do it. My best friend came over and said, if you don't start teaching this, I'm going to come over and knock you about the head every day until you do. And true to his word, that's what he did. And here I am now teaching this stuff, having gone on that 20-something year journey.
So you have the literal scars to prove it, which is good. I think,
Yes, yes. His name was Rob as well. Uh,
don't worry, I'm not going to do anything. We can't through the screen. I'm fine. I'm not going to hit you around the head.
Excellent.
So, I mean, you mentioned there about public speaking, and that's an element of training that I did when I started working for myself. I realized that to overcome my own hesitancy, I needed to be more confident, and I found whilst I'm not a professional public speaker, my work takes me around, it makes me travel and speak in front of groups. And I think it's probably one of the best pieces of training I've probably ever done, is that get out of my comfort zone and understand the importance of public speaking. Would you recommend people who are struggling with communication, it might be a good place to start?
Yes, and maybe. So the reason I say both are, so yes, first, being able to speak confidently in front of other people is a really important skill. If you can't do it, it's a career limiting skill. If you can't speak in front of a group of people that you don't already know, there is going to be a cap at which you can't rise above it successfully in your organization. So should people learn public speaking? Yes, I think it's a fantastic skill. It's diverse. You use it in so many areas of your work and personal life. The reason I also say maybe is because that might not be the place to start. And where I recommend people begin is look at what you do at work. Let's keep it in the work circumstance for now. So in your work, what are the communication situations that cause you the most challenge, trouble, anxiety? What are the situations? Is it talking to an executive? Is it running a meeting? Is it writing an email? Is it giving a status update? Is it answering a question in an environment where you're taken by surprise? What is this communication situation that you most want to work on? Then when you know that, you can start looking for what are the techniques that will help me in that situation and learn those. They might be public speaking based, but I think it's rare that we should start with public speaking. And can I give an example why?
Yes, please. Yeah.
All right. So public speaking is you need a lot of different techniques. You need to be able to be clear and concise, have stage presence, good vocal variety. There are lots of different things that come together to make someone a good public speaker. And it takes years to learn. It's a journey worth taking. It's worth investing that time, but it takes years to learn. But if someone gets up on stage and they have a wonderful presence and their voice and they can bring you in and they can boom out and they can do all of this stuff, but if they can't get to the point, what's the point? Like their great public speaking ability isn't helping them get a message across. It's just making them sort of perform well. So rather than adding all those extra things, vocal variety, learning about alliteration and bringing in wonderful ways to communicate your message, first of all, get good at creating a clear message. Learn that first, and then go on to get all the other bits in public speaking. So I wouldn't ever tell anyone yes or no without understanding what it is they're trying to achieve. But at some point, everybody should get to that point because it's should go down that public speaking path because it is a valuable skill.
No, and that I think that's an excellent clarification, and we're going to unpack more around the situations that you find yourself in, and I think it's a great signpost. What situations in your professional life make you most anxious and nervous and stressed? Let's think about that, and I think from the work that's in your book, the first minute, we are going to unpack and explore structures and frameworks that can help that. Before we do, Chris, I wondered, broadly speaking, what do you think the problem is with conversation? What's gone wrong? Why are we struggling to communicate at a
Oh,
macro? What's happening?
in the world according to Chris, which is the one that I get to speak with some authority from, but in my world, it's we're out of practice. We're out of practice and we don't have the opportunity to do it. And to understand this, we have to look back through history as to how we have grown up, and not just us in our generation. I'm going to assume we're in the same generation, but go back 100 years. How did society function at all levels? There were family units, there were social units. People knew everybody within their radius. It was unusual for someone to move to a different town. So life was about consistent social interactions with some formal hierarchy. There was the whoever was head of the household, whether it was mother or father, there was a head of the household, there was a structure, and you were introduced as a child into an increasing level of social interaction and what was appropriate and what was not. And conversation was a key part of that. Conversation with new people in your work, conversation with people in your street. All of that happened every day. There was a lot of opportunity to practice and a lot of guidance. Unstructured, it wasn't in schools, but it was structured through family. But it was sort of a loose introduction to it. And then lots of opportunities to like practice and get it wrong and get it right. Now we don't have that. We travel is so much easier. And travel, and we could say the internet, but travel was the biggest first change. You could move to a new area. As soon as you move to a new area, you don't have that lifelong social connection. So you then have to start building new relationships from scratch. And there's anxiety in there. Human nature is stranger danger. Strangers are to be not trusted. So there's a lot of effort required to integrate into a new social group. And the further we travel from our home, the bigger those gaps are, and the harder it is, the more effort we have to put in. Now we've got school catchment areas aren't just how far you can walk, it's driving. So kids don't get that close social group with their immediate neighbors all the time. They're not having conversations and they're not getting guidance from their families. Add in the internet, and we're a global, very, very spread out family. Like my family spreads across 3 different countries. We're not together. And that means people who are coming up through from babies and teens now in early 20s haven't had that strong social grounding in conversation. And we're constantly putting ourselves in new situations where there's a higher cost, energy, emotion, risk of engaging with new people. And so we don't. We say, no, I don't. I'll just stay at home and I'll talk to the people I know online, or I'll watch Netflix, or I'll do something because it's less scary and it's easier. And that's all human nature. It's not an accusation. So that's why I think the art of conversation has disappeared.
It's a huge, huge thing that you're trying to tackle, isn't it? I mean, what are the risks for those teens new to work, those entering the workplace? What are the risks, both professionally and I guess culturally, if we don't address this? Are talking in emojis wrong, for example? It might just be the new way we communicate. What are the risks you're seeing and might happen if we don't address this?
So first of all, is it right or wrong? That'll be situation specific, situation dependent, and communication evolves. It always does. Every generation thinks the generation above them is old and fuddy-duddy, and the ones below them don't know anything and they're rude. And that's been true through all of time. But what we're seeing now are greater divides, and we have more exposure to them. So go back 50 years, a lot of jobs were you go into a job and you work up through the hierarchy. You knew your place, you knew where you would go. And so you would observe the people above you and emulate that or be told that is what you need to do. We don't have that anymore. So the flexibility to move jobs and the rate at which you can move up and down in an organization has sped up change and reduced that consistency and learning environment. But what it's in terms of risks, the risk is older generations have more of that social upbringing, have more of that consistency built in from their childhood. For me, I saw my parents go through that hierarchical rise, so I had exposure to it. I didn't see it, but I was brought up knowing that's the way it would be. Turned out reality was different, but I had that grounding in you work your way up through the ranks. Here's how you interact with people. And I lived with my grandparents for quite a long time, so I had a big generational gap there. But when younger people now, I'm not going to name any particular group because the names always change, and
exactly.
people don't like being associated with I'm this type or that. But when a younger group comes into a mixed environment or an environment with an older generation, there's a greater conflict now because we're seeing less of that learning in the family environment, learning in the school and social environment for that communication. And the nature of how we communicate, you mentioned emojis, the nature of that is so far removed from anything that happened in the 70s, 80s, 90s. that it is very difficult for people who aren't really, really familiar with it to adjust.
Mm.
So we've got challenges on both sides. It's not the fault of those coming in. It's not the fault of those who are already established in a job. It's a natural evolution. But there is one place I would like to put a little bit of blame, and that's in education and employers. Big group,
Mm.
but we have education where we don't teach communication, and we have employers who say communication is the most important thing, and that new graduates or people coming out of school can't communicate. But no one's doing anything to bridge that divide. School is still doing what they've always done. Employers are complaining about the gap. They're not coming together to say, what is it that the employers need and how can education help address that? And so that gap exists, and it's just finger pointing on both sides.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think hopefully as we drill into more practical methods and techniques that are explained in your book, we can help bridge that gap. Because you're right, we see it in the training rooms that we go to, for example, where someone was once surprised or shocked that someone included emojis in an email. They were like taken aback. But for the person sending a similar email, it's just normal to them.
Yes.
And I guess just one more sort of broader level. Is communication, do you think communication is different digitally than it is in the real world? Or do the concepts of communication stay the same across both?
There are some elements that are the same across both, but there is a huge difference in digital text. Digital video, well, I'll come to in a moment, but for digital text, anything we do in writing, this was true when we wrote letters in the past, but it's definitely true now because we do so much more and it's fast. We cannot convey emotion clearly with just text. There are a number of studies that, and one of my favorites was asking people to identify whether something was being sarcastic. So we'd read a text and say, is this sarcasm or is it not? And the people who were delivering the message thought, well, strangers, maybe 60, 70% of them would get that I'm being sarcastic, people who don't know me. Well, the answer was 50-50. It's a coin toss. Total guess as to whether they would get it as sarcasm or not. They then did a piece of research with partners and spouses. Said, do you think your partner or spouse will understand your sarcasm? And of course they will. My partner knows me. They know my sense of humor. Absolutely, they'll get this. And the results are 50-50. It's a coin toss.
Wow.
Even the people who know us best cannot tell when we're being sarcastic or not, when it's just text. So in the digital space, there's so much text and it's so fast, and you send an instant message without that careful crafting of handwritten with a quill many years ago. Then we would be careful to put emphasis in to make sure our feelings were coming across well. Now, when we send a Slack message, it can seem like a demand when actually it was just a light-hearted request. So digital causes us problems there because the emotion doesn't come across, which is why emojis actually help. Say something and then put a wink at the end. Oh, okay, that's a joke.
Yeah, it's like the emoji adds the context to the message. I mean, yeah, how many times have you sent a message and you go, oh my God, I hope they read that right? Or they reply in shock. You think, well, hang on, I was just joking. It has a real risk of ruining opportunities and relationships and everything there, doesn't it? So good to capture that.
Stay away from sarcasm at work because 50% of the time people will interpret it as, if you're being serious, they might think you're being sarcastic, or vice versa. And either one of those is a bad outcome.
Yeah.
The benefit of
no, please go on.
No, please follow that thought.
Cool. No, I was just going to say, right, with the macro issues ticked, I wanted to take it into the practicalities of your work and in your book that you. I mean, you'll have a chance to tell us about that shortly with the first minute, which has been published, about how to start great conversations that get results. Things that are lacking in the workplace. We have noticed time and time again, things that are lacking at home as well, no doubt. I'm going to talk about three, I think, key points where hopefully you'll be able to share some real practical steps and advice. And the process that I identified in your work is that step one is you must prepare your audience. Step
Yep.
two is people are busy. You must get to the point quickly. I guess that comes back to being concise. And the most effective work-based conversations focus on actions and solutions, not on problems. I'd like you, if you're okay, to sort of step back to the first point and take each one in turn and explain what you mean by, for example, you must prepare your audience. How do we
Yeah,
mean by that?
absolutely. Absolutely. So when you're at work and you spot someone that you want to talk to, maybe you've grabbed them in the corridor, you've just turned up at their desk, or you're phoning them, doing a video message, you know what you're going to talk about. You know why you want to talk about it. You know why it's important. It's important to you. Your audience has none of those things. Most conversations at work, unless it's a planned meeting, are an interruption. And so if you're interrupting someone from their train of thought, from the work that they're doing, you need to help them transition from whatever they're thinking about to the thing that you want to talk about. And you only have about 20 seconds to do it. In fact, it's a little less than that, but being generous, you have about 20 seconds to do it. So a bunch of neurological processes occur in our brains that unless we understand what a topic is about, we're going to start thinking these things. What are you talking about? Why are you telling me this? And what's your point? And have you ever experienced conversations where you're listening to someone and thinking those things?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what are you trying to tell me?
Yeah,
I'm thinking in the back of my mind. So therefore, I'm not actively listening to what it is that you're saying in any way. I'm distracted, right?
absolutely. You're distracted. You're beginning to make assumptions. Oh, so this sounds like there's a problem. All right, I need to be in problem solving mode. And then a little while later, you realize it's just a funny story.
Mm.
Like, oh, I thought you needed me to fix something. That sort of emotional roller coaster, the conversational roller coaster that happens with those distracting questions of what does this relate to? Or those aha moments of, oh, you're talking about next Tuesday's meeting. I thought you were talking about the monthly thing that we've got coming up. That, those moments all cause inefficiencies, all cause confusion. And that's why you have to prepare your audience. And it's why the first method in the book is called framing. And it's a 15 to 20 seconds, 15 seconds if you're good, 15 seconds to prep your audience where you can tell them, this is what I'm talking about, this is why I'm talking to you, and this is my point. So that we answer those subconscious questions and then go into the detail afterwards.
Wow. And do you have any examples of how that might play out in real life? The preparing your audience. If I'm busy at my desk, or we have a meeting, or it's a let's say a prospect call, or some meeting that the recipient isn't prepared for, how might that play out?
Yes, so it's the three things in that first method, the framing method. It's context, intent, and key message. So what I do when I say context is what's the topic? I go, hey Rob, I want to talk to you about next Thursday's team meeting. It's one sentence, but you now know what do I want to talk to you about?
Hmm.
Next Thursday's team meeting. And that pushes most of what is in your head out. Unless you're really hungry or you need to go to the toilet, like there's some basic human needs that will be
Yeah.
high in your brain. But if I've interrupted you from your work, hey Rob, can I grab a few minutes? I want to talk to you about next Thursday's team meeting. I've got your attention on the topic that we're going to talk about.
Hmm.
The second thing is what do I want you to do about it? Hey, I'd like your help with something. So I tell you why you should be paying attention. I tell you why I'm going to be giving you other information. So it could be I want your help, or heads up, you need to know this, or this really, can I tell you a funny story? I need to let you know what to do with the information. That's the intent. And then the third part is the headline, the key message. So, hey, Rob, I want to talk to you about next Thursday's team meeting. Can I get your help? I've lost the list of participants and I'm not sure who to invite. Now, I've set up the conversation. At
Hmm.
that point, I might say, I've got these three. Do you have the list? Here's what's going on. You can ask some questions. Well, which meeting? We have two on Thursday, and so on. But we're into a conversation, and you know the critical answers to those three questions. What are we talking about? Why are you telling me? And what's your point? Are all answered so that you're prepared to have the rest of the conversation.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds so easy. It all just sounds so like, why don't we do this all the time?
It is simple, but we're not taught it. That's like, none of this is rocket science, and I'm officially qualified to be able to say that as a recovering past life rocket scientist. This is not complicated, but it does require practice. So these simple methods need to be practiced over a long period of time so that we become comfortable with using them.
And I guess it goes back to your earlier point of the public speaking bit. If you can't get to the point, what's the point? And you're creating more
Yes,
confusion and friction, right?
exactly.
Does that work for using that framework of preparing your audience, get to the point quickly? Does that work in a digital sense as well? Social media, email, Teams and
Yes,
Zoom meetings that we're all so busy with. Does the
yes,
same
absolutely.
framework apply?
Yes, it does. Yes, with tweaks and changes to fit the channel and the medium. So for email, the subject line should really be the context and the intent. I want to talk to you about next Thursday's team meeting. I need your help. So Thursday's team meeting, can you help? Might be the subject line because it's got to be short. And then in the first couple of lines of the email, I need to let you know, hey, I'm looking for some help from you for the next Thursday's team meeting because I've lost the participant list. And then I can go into other detail and expand and get into specifics. So it definitely works for email and for meetings. For things like Slack or other instant message channels, it's actually very helpful to get the other person the info that they need straight away. So it's, again, you can just use those same three pieces. Hey, I want to talk to you about this. I'm looking for that, and then something extra. The video, it works. I'm trying to think of a situation where it wouldn't. You mentioned social media.
Mm.
For that, it's going to depend on purpose. You've got in social media, you've got to get a hook, and that's a key difference. When you're at work, you're not trying to capture people's entertainment while they're blowing through lots of
Yeah.
other things on their screen. But in a social media environment or on a stage, there should be a hook, something to grab their attention, and then you quickly get into what is this about and so on.
Excellent. Yeah, it's fascinating. And you say the most effective work-based conversations focus on actions and solutions, not on problems. Is this a tripwire that you see people focusing on? Are they focusing on problems rather than solutions?
Oh, yes. And I include myself in this. We're all guilty of it. We like to complain. And talking
Mm.
about the problem is often slightly more satisfying than putting in the hard work to get to the solution, which is unknown and awkward or may not work, and there's uncertainty. And yeah, we just like to talk about what went wrong and why and whose fault was it. Very, very common human
Mm.
condition that we have. So part of part of the challenge, particularly if we're talking about something where there's an issue, is we end up having a backward conversation. We end up having a conversation that goes further into the past and further into the problems, which is further away from the solution that we're looking for. And that happens in a situation like this. I might say, let's say I worked for you, Rob. I'd come up and go, oh, Rob, can I have your approval to do this I need to buy something. Can I have your approval to buy something? What is the first question you have?
How much is it?
Ah, nice. Okay, so how much is it? Would you maybe also wonder, why do I need it or want it?
Yeah. What is it you're upset? What do you need to buy? Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm getting this thing so that I need this widget for my desk. It will make stuff go faster. And then the person goes, well, but why do you need that? Why is that
Mm.
important? Oh, well, we had this problem last week where this thing happened. Well, oh, what problem? How did that happen? Who was involved? What did you do about it? And you end up going further and further away from what you wanted, which is, I want approval to buy this thing. And that is very common. We talk more about the problems and what happened and who and why. Whereas with a very small change to how we start our conversations, we can make them go forwards. And so here's an example. If I start with a goal and then a problem and then a solution, which is the second framework in the book,
Mm.
I give you the key information to help us focus on the solution. because all of our work is about achieving goals. So it might be I'm producing monthly reports. My goal is to produce the monthly report. The problem is my computer is 800 years old and incredibly slow, and it's taking me 4 hours to run something that should take 2 minutes. What I'd like to do is buy this widget to upgrade my computer. Can I have approval to buy it? I've told you what I'm trying to achieve, and I've explained it in a way that it relates to something that you would understand as being valuable for the business.
Mm.
I've said what the problem is and what I want to do about it. Now you don't need to go backwards into all of those details. Does it make sense? Do I understand the problem? Is the solution worth it? Okay, yes, I'll sign that off.
Yeah, again, it's a simple concept, isn't it? But something that does, because that I assume if you have to go into your boss and say, "Oh, I've got a problem, I need to fix this," it's one of those situations where you might feel nervous about going into that
Yes.
conversation, right? And I guess culturally, we've always rewarded problem solvers. So therefore, problems is the highlight, isn't it? And it's a case of he's really good at getting over problems. And I've heard it time and time, just when you're talking there, I've heard it time and again where people walk into a room and say, there was a problem, but don't worry, I fixed it.
The hero complex.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a real, yeah, it's a real challenge to sort of the psychology of a conversation, isn't it? And
Yes.
therefore, owning it in the structure that you've just shared, I guess might put at risk that elevation in the hierarchy in some regards, because you're downplaying everything and making it so simple.
Yes. Yeah, it's so that element of how do I demonstrate that I've done big valuable things?
Mm,
That that does become a problem when you focus on solutions and actually move things forward. But you end up with better solutions and things have moved forward rather than three meetings still focusing on the past.
mm,
For the individuals that are looking for that recognition, there are so many reasons why that occurs. Now, many of us would jump to, oh, well, they're a narcissist. They just want to make it all about them and they're a hero. Whereas actually, it might be organizational culture, where every time someone talks about a problem that they solved, the important people in the room ask lots of questions about the problem. And well, what does that teach us? Well, then we should talk about the problem, and it's good to talk about it, and they're interested. And
mm,
the more I can expand on that, the more airtime I'm getting with the boss. And so company culture is usually far more influential over that than individual narcissism or other communication traits. And if we're in a team where somebody does that, here's something that people listening can absolutely take away and use right now. If there is someone in your team that always bigs up the problems, you now have a method that you can use to bring them back to something that's valuable for that conversation. They're going on and expanding about the problem. You can say, just put up a hand and go, "Hi, just want to double check something. So the goal we were trying to achieve was this, and there was a problem which you've explained. Great. And so what has been done about it, or what are we doing next? Sounds like you've solved it. What are we doing next?" So you can help move the conversation on by using goal, problem, solution to remind people that either we need to find a solution, we're working on a solution, or we've done one. What is happening next? And then you can move on.
mm. Yeah, and it's not rude or it's not impatient. It's still giving people the time and space to speak. It's just been more purposeful, because often you have conversations, don't you, where you leave the meeting or you leave the call and it's like, what have you just spoken about? What's actually been resolved? Nothing's been resolved. We have to go therefore and waste more of my time, but more importantly, the other person's time. My goodness, this simple structure can help overcome all that very, very
Yes.
quickly. Um, I want to ask Chris about measurement. About how can you track and measure progress in this space? Because
Mm.
obviously it's something that people always push back on. Does it work? I tried it once, it didn't work. Is this a habit formation? How can we measure it in the workplace, professional settings? Tell us about that.
Yes, it's definitely a habit formation. Think of not just these methods, but any communication methods. Consider them as learning a new language, learning a grammar rule in a different language. It might sound simple when you read it on the page, but
Mm,
actually it takes lots of repetition in different situations to really understand and get comfortable doing it without thinking. So these methods are simple, but it takes practice. Now, how do you know they're going to be valuable? With almost everything, you need feedback. So let's look at it from an individual contributor and a manager perspective. Managers can use this by literally evaluating when their team members come to them and say, did they give me context, intent, and key message up front? If yes, tick. If no, hey, by the way, when we started, I wasn't quite clear on these things. Could you next time just give me a couple of bullet points at the beginning to tell me, like, what is the topic, what you're looking for from me, and a key message, then we can get into the detail. So that's literally measurable. They could do it for 10 conversations a week. How many times did that person use the method? Very easy to measure. For people self-assessing, it's harder because our memories suck. We're not good at remembering exactly how we began. And of course, usually we think we're clear and concise. So the feedback comes from asking other people. If you do that in conversation, find a friendly, supportive colleague and ask for the feedback. Hey, when I start talking, do I use these methods? When I summarize something, do I use goal, problem, solution, or do I am I all over the place, or do I do something else? And then an easier way to actually evaluate on exactly what you said is to go back and look at previous emails that you've sent. Go and find your last 5 emails that are longer than a one line, so they've got some substance, and read the beginning. Was it clear in the subject line and the first 1 or 2 lines on the page? Was it clear what the topic was, what you needed the other person to do, and what the headline was? What is that key message? And if you're not doing it consistently, you now know what you can focus on to try and do it better in the future. Do it in your emails and then start doing it in your conversations.
Brilliant. I think it's a great application of it. And if you were to offer any quick wins, I mean, I don't particularly believe in silver bullets and quick wins, but it's always a nice hook. How can we start to put this in place today? We've listened to this. Fantastic. It sounds amazing. Is it as simple as just start? Use the framework. Where would you pick an environment to start it with from your list earlier that you mentioned might make you nervous? Where can a viewer or a listener take action on this?
Yes, well, the easy cop-out answer is just go out and do it. The slightly more practical and helpful answer is think of a conversation you need to have in the next 5 days. That's a big conversation, not hey, do you want to go for lunch? And not, is this the end of the company, end of the world? But somewhere in the middle, you're asking someone for status updates, you're asking for someone from help, you're going to deliver a bunch of information to someone. Pick a conversation and take 30 seconds to write down 3 bullet points and say, what is the topic? What do I want from them? What is my intent? And what is the key message I need to get across? Just that preparation will help you identify what you want to say and start your message clearly. And when I do this in training, there's usually about 1 in 10 people will come out at the end and say, I didn't know what my key message was. And that's a brilliant result. Absolutely brilliant. They usually feel, oh, I should have known, I failed in this. No, that's the perfect outcome for this task because you took 30 seconds to prepare and realized you weren't prepared. So you now recognized that you were going to have a failed conversation. So you get a few minutes to work out what your message is. And boy, is that conversation going to be better next time. So take that 30 seconds, write down those 3 bullet points, and that's the beginning of a conversation. And if you feel like you're doing it clearly, and if you feel like it was a better conversation, you'll get that encouragement to do it again next time.
Brilliant. Chris, I think it's been such a fascinating conversation, and the power of concise and clear communication is mega. And I think, yeah, thank you for your time. Your book is fascinating, by the way. Please do take some time to tell us about this and your other work I can see behind you as well. It's and how we can connect with you and your work.
Yes, well, most of what we've talked about today in the practical how-to stuff is from the first minute. It's not a big theory book. It's right there on the screen. It's a very thin book, and it's designed to give you practical methods to use right away. So framing, summaries, and so on, they are in the book. You can buy it wherever you like to buy books. It's available everywhere. And if you want to get in touch with me, my social hangout is LinkedIn. That's where I spend my time. And you can find me at chrisfenning.com. So just my name, nice, easy one to remember. And we've been talking about the first minute, but I've also got a series of other books. We've got effective emails for people who spend a lot of time on emails. And if anyone works in the training space, it's a lot of how I spend my time is delivering training. Now, I've written a book for 39 ways to make training stick, which is what we as instructors and educators can do after trainees leave the room to help reinforce, help habit build, help remind, and help our trainees remember and get the best out of the work that they've done. So if any of that sounds interesting, check out the books, get in touch. Be happy to help.
Brilliant. Chris, it's been a pleasure to speak to you, and thank you for sharing so many of your powerful insights from the work that you do, and good luck with bridging that gap from education to employment and beyond. Chris, a
Thank you,
pleasure.
Rob.
Thank you very much.